Hello everyone, welcome back to the Tonic Accord Catching Up episode. Today we're going to be catching up in South Dakota. A recent development as a result of the pandemic that we are always hearing about is a new clash between the Cheyenne River Sioux and Oglala Sioux tribes and the South Dakota state government. So the Cheyenne River Sioux and Oglala Sioux tribes installed multiple checkpoints on roads leading to their reservations in early April, as part of each sovereign nation's comprehensive emergency response to the spread of COVID-19. Now, the South Dakotan governor, she is worried about the restriction of free movement, of commerce, and of agriculture, and considers this, she's willing to take legal action against the tribes. This is Republican Kristi Noem. This is one of the 8 governors that did not enact a stay-at-home order. And so these tribes have been kind of doing their own response to COVID, and we're having this clash. So the actual response from these tribes is that their checkpoints that they're doing is a robust system. This is quoting Remy Bald Eagle, the Intergovernmental Affairs Coordinator for the Cheyenne River Sioux. His response is this: the checkpoints are part of a robust system to identify, isolate, and track individuals and make sure they are cared for properly. We are not restricting agriculture, commerce, or residence. They are free to come and go. This is part of our holistic plan to make sure our members are protected because we didn't see a plan from the state. So they're obviously throwing a little shade at Governor Kristi Noem. They don't think that the South Dakotan governor has responded enough or perhaps taken the correct route. She has claimed that her response reflects the herd mentality, and that it was up to individuals to decide whether to exercise, right to work, worship and play, or even stay at home. Again, we talked about in one of our previous episodes this balance between the idea of herd mentality, and I think the jury's still out on that one as far as the best response. I mean, the jury's kind of still out on everything as far as what the best response is, but it's understandable that these Cheyenne River Sioux and the Oglala feel that they need to take maybe some of the response into their own hands, and they've been doing that in the form of these checkpoints. This has kind of bubbled up even a little more as because the governor has responded strongly in saying that they will take legal action. The Guardian is saying that among some of the members of the tribes, it has evoked painful memories of previous U.S. intervention at Pine Ridge in the 70s. Well, in the 70s, this was the Wounded Knee occupation. In 1973, 200 Oglala Lakota and followers of the American Indian movement seized and occupied the town of Wounded Knee. They were protesting and trying to impeach their tribal president, Richard Wilson, who they accused of being corrupt. But it was also more of a general protest of the United States government failure to fulfill treaties with the Native American people, and in general, just the past treatment of the sovereignty of these nations. In the 1800s, in 17 and 1800s, there was a dark, tumultuous past with the United States. At even points, the United States recognizing these tribes as real and sovereign, and then a few decades later, reenacting that acknowledgement and leading to the seizure of massive amounts of lands. There's been documented genocide. The state of California would even pay people for Indian scalps. So there's obviously a dark history here that I think has to be at least acknowledged in this context of why there might be a tumultuous and adversarial relationship between some sovereign tribal nations and some governments like the state government of South Dakota or even the entire federal government of the United States. So again, 1973, we have this culminate into a standoff between FBI agents and 200 Oglala Lakota. This standoff lasted 71 days. Well, fast forward to today, there's fears of something like this again. So there's reports that, there are gatherings of these Native Indians around this Pine Ridge Reservation. Here's one quote from someone named Iron Eyes. They think that they can come in and do what they did in the 70s, disturb our peace, security, and safety, but this is a different generation, and the state has poked a sleeping bear. So it seems like, the rhetoric around this is getting increasingly adversarial again. It started as we have checkpoints. This is our holistic approach. South Dakota governor starts getting more angry and starts saying things like, we're going to take full legal action. And now this is the response. People are hearkening back to, standoffs in the 70s. Well, let's look at maybe where this legal action from South Dakota could go. In the past, we've seen that states actually don't have too much teeth in their legal action against sovereign nations. Throughout the 60s, there was the Menominee Tribe v. United States, which established that the establishment of a reservation by treaty, statute, or government includes an implied rights of Indians to hunt and fish on that reservation. Here's the important part: free of regulation by the state. So there you have it. In the 1960s, the federal government is enacting more agency and sovereignty into the tribal nations over some of the regulations by the state. Chief Justice Marshall found that England had treated the tribes as sovereign and negotiated treaties of alliance with them first. Then the United States followed suit, thus continuing the practice of recognizing tribal sovereignty at the federal level. And then a more recent case law that can maybe help us understand the current situation in South Dakota is one that come out of California, Inyo County versus the Paiute Shoshone Indians of the Bishop community. Funny enough, I've actually traveled through this part of the state quite often through Bishop, and I've actually seen the casino where this Supreme Court case takes place. Anyway, that's just a personal anecdote. I've been through Bishop multiple times. It's lovely, and I go to the mountains there all the time. Anyway, Inyo County versus the Paiute Shoshone, there was a problem where there was some Shoshone Indians in Bishop that were accused of fraud, and the Inyo County, the state government, wanted to enact search warrants. The Paiute Shoshone said that their sovereignty as a nation could overruled the state's ability to enact these search warrants. California, the state, was not happy about that and said that, no, that's bogus. Well, it went to the Supreme Court, and in the Ninth Circuit of the federal courts, they overruled this. They said that actually, in some cases, the Indian reservation sovereignty overrules the state ability and seizure powers of the states. That was in California. So if there isn't a problem again here today with the Cheyenne River and Oglala Sioux, that the state is now arresting some people or perhaps seizing the property at these checkpoints. Again, I may have to leave all these details to legal experts because I'm not one, but I can see how there might be a real Supreme Court case brewing here that may call into question again this notion of tribal sovereignty, the notion of state governments trying to search or arrest or seize. And like we've seen in the past, it's mostly something that's been dealt by the federal government. The state governments have not been given much agency to regulate these Native American Indian nations. Certainly something to keep an eye out. It's another example of parts of our society that have more and more cracks we're seeing because of this pandemic. This pandemic is maybe leading to conflicts that we hadn't thought about much or maybe are rebubbling up and resurfacing. Certainly to those that are, American Indians in this area, the Pine Ridge Reservation has historically been one of the most impoverished Indian reservations. I can definitely see how this is something that's not new. This is something that's just bubbling up again, and something that will probably bubble up time and time again, as we've seen through our past. Thank you for tuning into this catching up episode. Certainly stay tuned to this story. I'm definitely interested to see where it goes and what the South Dakotan governor decides to do, and I'm just interested in where this case leads. Definitely stay tuned for our regular full-length 30 to 40-minute episodes coming up soon. And please leave any comments. Find us at Facebook, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, all sorts of good and fun places to get your podcast content. Take care, and thanks again for listening.